My name is Anand Ranganathan. I am the Chief AI Officer at Unscramble. We are a startup in the AI space. Our main focus is getting data and insights into the hands of people that may have struggled to get access to data and insights before. So we want to make it as easy as possible for people to explore data sets and make decisions based on what they find. And I believe we're one of the pioneers in a space called conversational analytics. Essentially, what that means is we want people to be able to ask questions of their data in natural language and get back answers, again, in natural language or in charts. So this is a pretty new space. There are a few companies working in this, and we are the first ones. And over the course of this presentation, I'll show you what we mean by conversational analytics and why you might be interested in it. So as we know, times have been changing. The last few months have seen a dramatic change in the way people live, work, and play. And this, it's become a cliche now, but there's definitely a new normal. And it's now become very commonplace for people to be able to work from home or work remotely. A lot of work now happens in collaboration platforms like Slack or Microsoft Teams or Zoom as well, like in this call. And people have figured out how to be productive in these settings. So they figured out how to collaborate with other people in these environments remotely. But there's still one big bottleneck, and that is data. It's still very difficult for people to get access to relevant data or the data they need to make decisions quickly. And there are several reasons for this. In many organizations, data adoption still remains very low. So there's a survey done recently where only 31% of businesses claim that they are actually data-driven, and that's actually gone down since 2017. And several reasons for this. So one is that many business users just find it too complex to access data. So they don't know what the data is. It could be spread across different databases or applications. So it takes them a long time to find out where the data is. And even if once they know where it is, they may not know how it is modeled or the right way to ask queries. So they have to rely on separate IT teams or data analyst teams or data scientist teams to get access to data. Most of the business users find it very difficult to use the tools that are needed to get access to data. So they may not know SQL, or they may not know the right BI tools to get them the data. So while a lot of work has now shifted to collaboration platforms like Microsoft Teams and Zoom, data still remains far away from business users. So it's still a challenge for them to get the data that they need. And this is a challenge not just for organizations, but even for the general public. So the last 10 to 20 years have seen a dramatic increase in well-maintained public data sets, especially with the open data or linked data initiatives started by many cities and countries and other organizations. So a good example of this is actually with the recent pandemic. There have been several organizations maintaining very detailed data sets about the COVID pandemic. So for instance, the most famous one is probably the Johns Hopkins University data set. There are also data sets being maintained by New York Times, by the Wall Street Journal, and several other organizations, the WHO as well. So in spite of all these data sets available, most people do not directly access the data sets. They have no way to actually play with data sets and get the insights that they need, either about their own community or about their country. So it's still, there's still a big gap between the general public and data sets. And so what happens in these situations is that people rely on others to analyze the data and present opinions or insights to them. So, and that's a challenge. So there are different organizations that have created dashboards and charts of different kinds to present analysis, for instance, about COVID. And while this is good for people to get a high-level summary of what's going on, it's not ideal. So dashboards have several challenges. So very often there is either no or very limited drill downs, which means that once you see a high-level statistic, it's very oftentimes impossible to dig deeper into understanding the different components of the statistic and how the statistic was produced. So let's just answer dashboards. Also, very often we may not know how the data for those dashboards or charts were prepared. So that might result in a lack of trust about whether that chart was actually valid or invalid. Also, charts and dashboards tend to answer one very specific set of questions. So you can't ask a very different question and get the answer. So you're limited to what the chart or dashboard is telling you. And probably the most challenging part of a dashboard is that a dashboard is actually more like an art. So an artist who is a dashboard creator will take the data, decide what's most interesting to present, and cherry pick some data in some cases and present what they think is most relevant. So a dashboard is almost like an opinion piece rather than facts very often. And this can be misleading. And this is a challenge not just for public data sets, but even within organizations where CEOs or CMOs or other business users have to rely on dashboards or charts being produced by some other organizations to make decisions without having the ability to play with the raw data themselves. So I'll give a couple of examples of how this has been an issue recently, especially with the COVID pandemic. So a few months back, there was a chart that was being shown about in many media outlets that the US is doing a very good job in handling the pandemic. And according to this chart, the US was the second best among all the countries in the world in terms of this metric called observed case to fatality ratio. So just looking at the chart, you think the US is doing a great job, but this chart is actually very misleading. So firstly, it's using very cherry-picked data. It's just picking a few sample countries to compare the US against. Secondly, it's using a kind of slightly more obscure metric. The better metric is deaths per capita deaths, or deaths per 100,000 people. And if we take that metric specifically, then the US is like among the bottom 10 or 12 countries. This is from about May or June of this year. So it's pretty easy to cherry pick data and create a chart that can mislead people. And if people don't have the opportunity to ask questions of the data themselves or play the data themselves, then there's no way for them to dig into this and make their own judgments on whether this chart is valid or not. There's another recent example from the same time period. This is from April 2020. So this chart or graphic that is going about different social media channels, Facebook and Instagram and others, that said that it took a collection of about 10 supposedly democratic states and said that the cases and deaths in those states were far worse than a separate collection of about 10 Republican states that had about the same population in total. And the claim was that democratic run states were incompetent medically or something else was going on. And again, this is kind of misleading. So this is actually fact-checked by USA Today, and they gave a whole bunch of points on why this was false. So firstly, Maryland has a Republican governor, even though it's put in the Democratic column. Also, considering those states, the actual numbers of cases and deaths for Democratic states were actually lower. Republican states was much higher. So even though maybe in total Democratic states had higher cases and deaths, the numbers were wrong, and it seemed much worse than it actually was. There were other things that were going on in this data set. So there was, in general, significant underreporting of cases, at least in March and April, when testing was pretty low. And a big issue was that this graphic is conflating correlation and causation. So it just so happens that these states that had more cases and deaths were democratic, but the better explainers for this statistic was things like density and demographics and not politics. So with all of this, Facebook then eventually, after maybe a few weeks, labeled this post as false, and then it no longer was being circulated as much. So that's just a couple of examples of how charts or dashboards prepared by other people can suffer from biases. And it's very important for people to be able to play with raw data themselves and make their own judgments. So solutions to give more power to the people. And there have been different approaches that software companies have taken to help people play with the data themselves. So this whole notion of self-service business intelligence. Our approach has been this space that we call conversational analytics. So the idea here is that we want people to be able to ask questions in natural language against their own data sets. So for instance, ask questions in English or the languages, and then get back responses again in natural language as well as charts, and then be able to have a conversation with the data. So be able to get a statistic, dig deeper, find out more information, and have a conversation. So we think analytics should be conversational as opposed to most charts or dashboards, which are more like sermons that somebody's preaching that this is the truth and please believe it. So to make something like conversation analytics possible, several technologies have to come together. So we need natural language processing for understanding what humans are saying, being able to interpret their questions and figure out why something, what they mean and what kind of data they're looking for. We need machine learning and automated insights to figure out what are the interesting insights in some data set, what is most relevant to present to any given user. How do we best explain this data? How do we best present it? Whether it should be as a map or a bar chart or just text. So all these things, different aspects of AI have to come together to make conversational analytics possible. So in fact, Gartner has actually predicted that very soon, a very large number of analytical queries are actually going to come from voice or text. And we've seen that happen. It's already happening with chatbots and tools like products like Alexa and Google Home. But now we think it's going to have this revolution is going to take over the business intelligence and data analytics space as well. Finally, another important point is that a lot of people spend time on chat platforms like Microsoft Teams or Slack or Zoom in enterprises or other chat platforms like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. And conversational analytics is a natural way for people to start asking questions and conversing with the data on these platforms as well. So we want to go from an old world where most people don't have access to their own data, might take them days to get answers to simple questions, to a new world where people get insights by just asking for it. And everybody has a personal data analyst that knows how to answer their questions. So just a couple of slides just about our approach to this problem. So we have a bot called Cubo, which people can access through a website or through Microsoft Teams or a mobile app and start asking questions on data. So here are some examples of questions that you can ask from on a bot. And these are some examples from a sales and revenue standpoint. So you can ask questions like, why have sales dropped this month? Or what are the predicted sales in the next 15 days? Show me a trend for sales by time of day. Hey, Cubo, what's the response for trade promotions from the last month so far? So let's, and again, this is something that's possible across different industries, across different roles of people. So for instance, supply chain, revenue, all of them need data of some kind or the other. So supply chain operations analysts could ask questions like, what's the predicted order volume from New York City for the next few months? Who are the worst suppliers? The CFO can ask questions like, what is the average revenue per customer per month in a given month? Or why was revenue in August lower than the previous month? Again, questions from fraud detection, risk management, marketing. So we've seen this. We've seen a great interest in our product, and in general, in this idea of conversational analytics across different industries, across different roles of people, and we think can dramatically change the way people work. So I'll switch over to a demo now, just to give an idea of how people how this all works. I noticed a couple of questions have been coming in. I'll probably get to those once I'm done with the talk, maybe in about 10 minutes or so. So I'll switch over to a demo, and this is a demo. This is our web interface where people can, where users can log in. And you can check out our interface at unscramble.com or on the product qbo.ai. And there's a free trial as well that you can play with if you're interested. So once I log in, this is actually a system that's I've set it up for going against the coronavirus COVID data sets. So once I log in, I get a bunch of different information about top questions people have been asking and what kind of data sets, what kind of topics people can ask about. So in this case, there's data sets about from JHU, from New York Times, and so on. So let me give you some examples of how you can go about asking questions. So let me start a new thread. So this is a very chat-based interface, so people can start new threads of conversations. And once I create a new thread, let me call this, let's say, ideas. And I can start asking questions like total deaths. So when I ask a question like total deaths, the system knows the different data sets that are available and decides which is the best data set to use, firstly. And after that, once it decides on the best data set, it converts that natural language question into a SQL query and goes against that data set and comes back with an answer. So in this case, it picked a US-based data set, and it says that there were 209,340 people who have died based on the data set, and it gives some information that data set ranges from Jan 2020 to October 15. So that's today, actually yesterday probably. I can dig a bit deeper. So for instance, I can also find out what is the actual SQL query. So that natural language query got converted into this particular SQL query with these parameters. So if you are curious to know exactly which table it picked, for instance, it's called CT_US_COVID test, exactly what the query was, as now transparent. So we know how the conversion happened. So one of the points over here is that this is a conversation, right? So which means I can dig deeper. So I can say something like by state, and now it knows the context. That the context is total deaths. So by state is interpreted in the context of the conversation, and gives me a couple of different options. I'm going to pick one of those: refine and group by province state. It also did some intelligent matching, so it knows that state match is close match to a column name called province state in one of the tables. So now it shows the results as a map. It picked a map because that was the most, since it's location data, it was probably one of the more meaningful or interesting ways of displaying that particular data set. If I wanted, I could have picked a different visualization as well, so either a map, different kinds of maps, or a table. But yeah, so it picked a map over here, and that comes out now as showing which states have had the most number of deaths. I can now further say, give suggestions as well. So let's say I pick this one, refine, and further group monthly. Since it's a conversation, we try to help users pick various questions to ask. So now it's giving for each state and for each month how many deaths occurred. So I can go again over here and try to go a bit deeper, see all the data coming here. And in this particular data set, there was not just the US states, but even some other territories like Samoa. I can change the visualization, maybe make a line chart. And I see maybe this is pretty busy. So it's got 50 plus states. It's also got some of the territories that are all showing up over here, all being bunched up. So let me change this and try to make this a bit less busy. Again, through conversation. So let me say, I would say refine and restrict to a few states. I'll say Connecticut, which is where I am from, and New York, and let's say Texas, and California. We pick a few states that I want to restrict the data to. So one thing you'll notice is that if there's any ambiguity in the questions, it gives you different options on different meanings. So when I said refine restrict to, it asked specifically how I wanted to apply those filters. And now it's giving exactly those 4 states that I asked for. I can go back and go back to a line chart, for instance, and we get data for those 4 states. So, for instance, New York had a big spike in total deaths in April, and then it went down and it's been very low since then. Connecticut too, slightly. Texas and California for the one past. Texas especially had a big spike in August, California too, for instance. So somebody can actually just ask these questions in English and get charts as they need, as they desire, instead of relying on a specific chart that somebody has prepared for them. So let's do a couple of other things. So let's do examples. Let's say I want to focus on California, and I say total deaths and total cases in California. So I want to maybe compare how deaths and positive cases moved. How does metrics move? So for instance, there were California seen a total of, I guess, 16,000 deaths and 858,000 positive cases. And I can further say refine and show monthly just to see how it's changed. Refine and monthly. So yeah, so the total number of, let me zoom over here. So yeah, total number of positive cases is pretty high. So for the deaths comparatively has been low. So let's actually see that. Let me actually add this to a board, which is one way. Let's say I found something interesting that California is a case where the number of deaths seems to be remaining pretty low, although the number of positive cases has gone up. But let's actually, so over here I can do a few more things. Let me add some metrics like positive case rate, just to see how that changes over time. So the positive case rate, though, I guess it's pretty high at the beginning. It was over 25% in April, and then it's went down and went back up a little bit in July, and again it's down. It's like 2.6% now, much lower than at the beginning. I can add more things, like let's say hospitalizations. So number of hospitalizations that happened over the course of time. So let me take out some metrics. So hospitalizations, yeah, so there are lots of hospitalizations in April, and people start, so some of them are going to negative territory. So lots of hospitalizations in April, people coming out of the hospital probably in May, which is why it's negative, and more hospitalizations in June and July, people coming out in August. So yeah, so now we can play with different metrics, group and slice and dice, however we want, again, conversationally or through a UI-based approach. Let me just do one more set of things in this demo. So go back to the conversation view. So let's say I want something like monthly total. So yeah, so this is an example. This is a case. This is for the whole of the US. So the monthly positive total number of cases was low in January, February, increased in April, increased dramatically in July. So let's say I want to dig deeper and say, why did cases increase in July compared to June? So I can even ask why questions. So let's say why is the total cases in July 2020? So again, natural language. So this is a more detailed question. So while the previous questions were what I would call descriptive analytics, this is diagnostic analytics, which is digging into possible reasons why something changed or something happened. And in this case, again, some automated analytics and machine learning to figure out what are the top reasons why this change happened. So in this case, it identified that statewide decomposition or statewide analysis is the most interesting to show. And it says, okay, key reasons are that certain states like Florida, Texas, California, Georgia, all had massive increases in July compared to June. And that's the reason why the total number of positive cases overall in the country was much higher. So this is an example of slightly more detailed analytic that's possible with a conversation tool like this. So pause the demo here and come back to my slides. So just to summarize, we believe that in general, data-driven organizations are the ones that are going to be leading their industries. And conversational analytics is something that we believe will dramatically change the way people relate to data, interact with data. So they don't have to wait for data anymore. They can interact via just natural language, either text or voice. And also possible on chat platforms like Slack or Teams. They can slice and dice on as they desire, not be limited by what's presented in some dashboard. And another interesting thing is that you can do group chats, which is something I didn't show, but a group of people could be chatting together and conversing with the data. And finally, you can collect the findings and present them and repeat the analysis. So a few different points about this. So one of the key interesting things of systems like these are that they can be a single front end to a variety of backend data sets. So you could connect to different databases, and many organizations have probably multiple databases, multiple data sets. Sometimes some of the data sets just Excel files, but there's a way for people to just be able to ask questions on the data across the sources easily. A couple of other things about conversational analytics. So there's natural language queries, there's guided conversations, interactive charts, analysis predictions. And a couple of more interesting things about conversational analytics in general is that you're able to drill down conversationally. So you can ask one question and then ask follow-up questions. Another interesting thing about conversations is that, like any chat platform, is that you have a chat transcript. So I can go back and see what conversations I had about my data, yesterday or last week or last month, and see, what I did. And it's pretty valuable and very often to keep a transcript of any kind of analysis. And same thing happens with, and this is something that's possible with conversational analytics. So yeah, so I just end the talk over here and say, the future of work is we believe is partly going to be in the space of conversational analytics. And we believe it's not just something which is going to impact enterprises, but even the general public, where they have access to rich data sets much more easily. Again, you can try out our interpretation of conversational analytics at our website, keyboard.ai. But yeah, I'll stop here and just see what questions have been coming up. So yeah, so Zoom has the question and answer button. So question from Shmuel. So his question is, let me just say it out for people who are not seeing the questions themselves. His question is, if according to my opinion, there's an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's a digital AI revolution as a result of the pandemic, as Zoom, different forms of our connection to others will continue to influence our lives after victory of the pandemic too. Yeah, no, I do believe that that the pandemic probably just accelerated a trend that was anyway growing. So even after the pandemic, I think many companies have announced that they will allow employees to keep working from home. And I think people have become very familiar with tools like Zoom and Slack and Teams and other chat platforms. In fact, I know people that are happy that that some of the that work is happening offline. Even some people are happy that schools are happening offline because they feel that the kids are more productive at home than at school. So it is something that I think will continue beyond the pandemic as well. That the change in the way people work is going to continue, especially technologies like conversational analytics. It's just gotten a speed up with the pandemic, but it is a trend that is happening over time anyway. So that was Shmuel. Question from Mohammed Khani. I don't think he had a question. Okay. This question was, what do you think the benefit of AI and machine learning has had during this global pandemic? Benefit of AI and machine learning during this global pandemic. So yeah, so firstly, I think AI and machine learning, there are lots of applications of AI machine learning in general. In fact, I think one of the reasons why some drug companies have said that they are able to get a vaccine go further is because very often they use AI to figure out to sift between different possible drugs much more rapidly than was possible before. It was more manual. So that's just one impact one example that I can think of off my head. But yeah, there have been, I'm sure there's been different cases. So even things like when Zoom, there's definitely some AI going on in the back end for people, for it to do a better job with the sound quality and the video quality and so on. Learning how to block background noise, for instance, is a machine learning problem too. So yeah, I definitely see there's a big impact there. A couple of questions before. David, can you ask per capita? Yeah, and that's possible in the demo as well. And then I can, if you're interested, I can do a deeper demo at some point. I don't know how much time I actually have. But yes, you can ask questions per capita as well. Yun Jiang, is this software for healthcare analytics? Not just for healthcare. Healthcare is one domain, but this is something which can be used for different industries. So we actually have people in finance, in telecommunications, in insurance, retail, aviation. So different industries all have data. So the common theme is that there are lots of industries where access to data is a challenge, and wherever that is a challenge, a tool like this can play a role. So healthcare is just one example, but lots of industries have similar issues. Hemant, is this recording available to review later? I'm not sure. I think you can check with the ideas team.
Yeah, but this is Jason. I can answer the question. So definitely, we are recording all the sessions. I think it may take 2 weeks for the engineers to make the video published on YouTube. Ideas, we do have a YouTube channel for ideas, communications. If you go to YouTube, you can search International Data Engineering and Science Association. We have almost all the videos since 2015, since our first conference. Hopefully, this can answer your question. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah. A few other questions. Hemant again asked, do you have an example where AI was helpful in vaccine research? Yeah, I can dig up, I think, some articles I've read. So I put on my email address here, so anybody who wants to get in touch with me directly, can get in touch with me either on the email or by LinkedIn, and I can provide some of the pointers that I've read about at least. Christine Nellen, are you sharing your slides? Yes, as we heard from Jason. Will the recording be available? Yes. Would this help with analyzing social media data as well? Yes. Actually, so right now, at least our product is something that works well with structured data. We ourselves don't do structured data, but there are other companies which do amazing jobs in processing unstructured data, like Twitter data, for instance. But yeah, once the data is in a structured form, you can definitely use a tool like this to ask questions like, who are the top 10 people in a given space with the most number of followers, for instance. So that kind of question is relatively easy for a tool like this to handle. Further, how would this benefit healthcare and biotech organizations and companies? Yeah, so there are different examples. So like one example I showed was the COVID data sets where somebody can ask questions on COVID data. We're also working with some hospital IT companies. So for instance, they can ask questions on things like on claims or patient readmissions. So asking questions like which patients or what's the percentage of patients that have been readmitted to my hospital in the last 2 months. So those are good questions that hospital administrators are very curious to know. Another thing which is another popular question in that space is what's the percentage of my patients who are uninsured, and also among my patients who are insured, what's the percentage of denied claims? So things like that are statistics that hospitals are very keen to know about. And simply there are other questions that that definitely important in biotech, pharmaceutical, other industries too. Question from Nathan. What's the tech stack you use for your front end and back end? What API framework do you use to send queries to machine learning models? The tech stack, yeah, sure. So we actually have a React-based front end. That's our front end. It's also using the bot framework as a means of handling the actual dialogues, and that also allows us to integrate easily with other chat platforms like Facebook and Microsoft Teams and others. What API framework do you use to send queries? Yeah, so we use a combination of Thrift and Thrift actually as the main API framework to communicate with Python-based models. Question from Kumar. First, it is informative. How can we see the AI impact in India in the coming future? We actually could click this button and see what happens. Okay. AI impact in India. I think this is something which is going to be useful across the geography, across different geographies. So you can. The same questions I asked on the US data set could also be asked about just India, for instance. And I think it will revolutionize access to data in general, especially and India has also seen a lot of new interest in open data. So there's several public data sets for everything from crime to the COVID and to everything else, plus other topics. So I do see there being a big impact. Balachandra in the agriculture sector. Yeah, so I don't have an example top of my head in agriculture, but yeah, if you are in the agriculture sector, get in touch with me, and then maybe we can discuss possible use cases. But yeah, I mean, if you have data on things like crop yields or soil or weather, those are things you can all combine together. So maybe ask questions like, what's the correlation between crop yields and humidity, for instance. Tariq, question on how do we connect this tool to my database or my cloud, public or private? So that's a question about our tool specifically. So we offer a couple of different deployment options. We have a software service approach model where it can be on the cloud and can connect to your databases or to your databases if they are accessible over the internet. We also have a version that you can install on your own machine. Typically needs a Linux server. But you can install on your own server or virtual machine and point it to your own databases or your own other data sets like Excel files. So there are two options available in terms of deployment. Question from Mohammed Imran Salim. In spite of a lot of progress in this field, where will you stand after a decade? That's difficult to say. I think we are optimistic in terms of where this will end up, and I'll just go by my own experience in terms of me and my household using tools like Alexa or Google Home. So people had used Alexa, say, about 4 years back or 5 years back. I don't remember exactly when it came out. It would maybe answer about 30% of my questions, and now they get about 80% of the questions. And now this is a new space where people are asking analytical questions on data. So I think over the course of a decade, I'm sure this might almost be commoditized. Yunyun Jiang, does this produce statistical analysis such as hypothesis testing? Under the covers, yes. So there's hypothesis testing that's taken out. That's that's done to understand the top factors or top reasons why something happened. So the example I showed when I asked a why question, why is something, why did the number of total positive cases decrease or increase in July compared to June? Behind the scenes, some statistical testing is performed to figure out if a certain reason, a certain metric or change in value might be statistically significant reason for a change in a metric cases. Right now, at least, we haven't directly implemented statistical features, so you can't ask it to say do a t-test on this metric against this other metric, for instance. And that's because we think that the key audience here is business users. So while they want statistics to inform what's coming to them, they may not, necessarily ask questions about statistics. So yeah, so that's sort of the answer. So if you're there are other tools out there that are more suited for doing actual data science. Hemant asked, AI can work if you have correct data sets associated to competitive nature. Is COVID research is shared at global level? That's a good point. We do rely on data sets being correct, but a tool like this, that's one of the big advantages that actually this is actually connected to, I think, at least 4 different COVID data sets. John Hopkins one, New York Times one, WHO one, and one more, I can't remember. So you can ask a question saying, okay, based on the GSU data set, what's the total number of cases? Or based on the New York Times data set, what's the total number of cases? So it is possible to at least do that kind of analysis. And in fact, competition is a good thing there. So you can say, give me the average total deaths across all data sets. So something that's possible to do in a tool like this.
Hi, Anand. Sorry for the introduction. So we have 3 minutes to go.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just take the last 2 or 3 questions. I'll keep answering the other ones on the chat. So Sridevi Kota asked, what's the technical stack leverage behind Cubo? So it's a combination of the front end uses React and the bot framework. We use a whole bunch of machine learning models, mainly in Python for the backend. A variety of tools being used there, everything from NLTK to different open source machine learning libraries. And again, if you're interested, we can dig deeper into the stack if you want to go to the details. Mohammed Ghani asked, how has efficiency been improved using AI, which would allow us to be better prepared for the large peak? I'm guessing people are now used to Zoom, right? So it's or collaboration platforms in general. So in terms of AI, I think I think AI has been helping efficiency in a variety of ways even before the pandemic. So from everything from fingerprint recognition to image face recognition, automatic security, biometric security, and so on. All those are maybe used to be called AI 10 years back, and now are no longer AI because they're so commonplace. So in fact, one of the curses of AI, I think there was an article, that's a famous article, I remember, I think by Douglas Hofstadter, saying that the curse of AI is that anything that's what is AI right now is what is currently challenging. And what is AI 10 years back is people might think it's no longer AI because it's no longer challenging. So yeah, I think it's something which AI has obviously improved efficiency in different ways over the last several years. I'll take one last question. Okay, Balachandra actually gave an answer for the agriculture, maybe like leaf disease detection. Yeah, I agree. I think if we have leaf disease data, I agree. Okay, so one last question, Christine. Sounds like a tool could be used for social listening purposes. Using tools like HubSpot. Yes, that is true. So we actually have integration with HubSpot. So if you have a HubSpot account, then we can directly query that to get you information about your top customers or top leads or number of leads assigned to a given salesperson, for instance. So we do have HubSpot integration. So if you're interested, please get in touch with me, and I can go deeper into tools for HubSpot, and also similar topics around marketing data in general. And yes, it's also useful for multivariate data analysis from different data sets. So the example I briefly showed on comparing two different metrics and understanding relationship between them. Yes, so that is possible as well. So I'll stop here. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Jason, the Ideas team, for this opportunity. And I'm happy to stay online if there are more questions. I can resolve them over chat, or if not, please get in touch with me, and I'm happy to answer your questions.